very often in the Graff world, and that, of course, is Rest in Peace. So that piece is up there, but everybody's getting up on this wall. I mean, it's a madhouse. Just crazy. Well, at the end of the day, it was an exciting day, lots of beatboxes going, and a cop car came up, and before the cops got out of the car and got halfway to the wall, somebody came and painted cars. That was the end of Psycho City. That was it. And for many years. You've seen Rem through the other things. Reminisce had these wonderful horses that floated around the Mission, floated through the city. Her father was a very well-known artist, and they had a sense of joy, a sense of freedom, reconstitute. Just exciting to see on a bare, most uninteresting wall, to see the horses that were galloping around the city. And of course, this is the home of Barry McGee, the Mission. Barry Twist is probably almost in the class of the Herrings and the Basquets. These are his early characters. This is what he painted in the early days. And interesting that the shirt and the tie, but no hair. That's how he kind of saw those people. So this is in Norfolk Alley. It's kind of on the edge of the Mission, but he did this, I believe, for a magazine cover or something, and then it was quickly painted out. So if you didn't get the picture early, you didn't get the picture. And he wrote with KR for many years, and they would go up on the tops of buildings. And in those days, the screw was a kind of a Barry thing. The face was a Barry thing. Alex Neon in the audience here tonight has a marvelous canvas of faces like these that he just traded with Barry in those days, because people didn't put prices on art and just traded. Here's 96, we're up on this building, Felon, a whole bunch of people, probably got up there at night and just, 1, 2, 3, and the next day there it is. I want to talk about consumerism, co-ops, oppositional culture. So what happens here is that Plymouth wants you to think that some terrible young kid like Eric in the middle of the night came and tagged up there. No such thing. They first put out the car, the High, and the Plymouth. 3 months later, they have the sheets with the Mohawk, the hip, and the Plymouth. They thought that was really cool, right? Well, the advertising world hated it, and the writer said, gee, we could do so much better a job, let us get at your thing. So we see examples through history of so many corporations wanting to capitalize on this so-called oppositional culture. But the culture was a real culture. It wasn't oppositional necessarily. It was its own culture. It was finding its own place, its own space, its own commentary that couldn't get into the media, couldn't get into the newspapers, and so the walls and public space was really where they could be. Now, one of the things that I didn't really mention in the beginning is this whole business of now street art. Street art doesn't have a spray can necessarily, and it's kind of the current thing. So, if you want to be known as toilet seat, there you are. And if you put up enough toilet seats, you can get recognition. You can be Buff Monster, or you can be Pessis in Barcelona. You can be Swoon. You can have a whole book by wheat pasting around the country. There's a whole tremendous movement now to the wheat pasting. But what is interesting to me, and you get arrested for this, of course, and fined, but if you're Disney and you put up all of this paper about a show or anything else, nobody bothers you. So there's a real demarcation as to who breaks the law. And obviously, it's decided that youth breaks the law, but commercialism for Disney and for anybody else, that's just fine. Here's a shot of Barry. I went to his studio many times. Some of the things he was working on, a lot of his faces, some of his glass jars were over here. And I decided very early to follow Barry's work and to follow Disney's work and one or two other people just to see where life would lead them and lead us. Because remember, 1987, when we brought out spray can art, we told Thames and Hudson, get the book out. This thing could be dead next year. We may find a market that has no interest in what we're doing. So here we are in 2010, and we're utterly amazed, obviously, at the worldwide aspect of millions of people, millions of websites. But in those days, I went to Chronicle Books, and I took the sales manager with me to the mission. And we had a ride around, and I indoctrinated him into the whole culture. He was very excited. Went back to Chronicle Books, and the first question they asked me was, well, where does he have a museum show? I said, well, he doesn't have a museum show, but he will have one. Why don't you get in there early? But they couldn't understand that, and they couldn't see it. So that's just the way it goes. You get there early sometimes, and nothing happens. I want to mention the wall at 280, and where the highway turns to go to Daly City. That's the Dream Wall, and many artists came together there, probably around, and Eric was on that wall prominently, to pay their respects to Dream. Dream never wrote the same letters twice. I have literally 1,000 different dreams from the Oakland walls and other places, always slightly different style. He was a master with style. Another of the dream pieces, King Dream, and that wall's still there. You can go see it. 1999, it's lasted for 11 years. And then there are writers who come to San Francisco. They move from, I first found Cycle. Isn't this marvelous? C-Y-C-L-E. I first found him at school in Washington, D.C. Then I found him in L.A. Pretty soon he was here in San Francisco. And of course, he's writing in Brooklyn today. So he has his whole history of being around the country. Very innovative, very creative, truly worthy of the name masterpiece. Well, the trains don't run through the mission exactly. They run under a tunnel. So they're not the object of the affection. But if there was a freight yard, Crayon would be standing there, kind of looking it over. And that's, of course, how you write when you go to the freights. How do you get up on top? Well, you kind of hang up or put your feet on both sides. These are, of course, from Oakland, where their freights are very prominent. Now, you remember I mentioned to you, it's okay if you're a corporation and you want a wheat paste, nobody bothered you. But if you're a youth, it's a felony, it's an over $400 fine, and we really need to understand, who makes the laws, who the laws are for, and why youth certainly rebelled, rightfully so. There is a little store over at Valencia. This is the storefront. Kind of fun the way it comes out. But in the back, very few people get to the back of his store. There's Chor Boogie. That's pretty nifty. You can see Chor Boogie on Market Street. He's got a great big piece there. You can go to Dubai and see him in Dubai. You can go to Zazzle's office down on the peninsula and see him there. Remember, these are not taped. They're out of a spray can, it's true. There are different caps, different ways of doing it, but pretty remarkable stuff. And then this is I'm trying to think of his name for a minute, 75, who painted the other part of this. So the two of them have been working together. Isn't that rather spectacular? I think so. E-O-N, 75.
Max Urban